Yes.
All right. So today we're like I said, we're going to continue working our way through this exam blueprint, which means we want to sort of master all of these concepts, um, all the concepts that are in the blueprint covering our second domain. Where did I put it? It's right here. So domain two, client relations and behavioral coaching. Like I said, this is a bit of a it's a bit of a smaller section, but it's worth just as many points. So like weirdly, the density of questions is going to be a little bit higher, um, just because you're still getting the same number of questions, but stretched out over only two chapters instead of like, gosh, I think it's like four or five chapters in the other one. So it's definitely smaller. You guys can see here, domain two here. I'm not gonna say what I normally say, which is like because it's smaller, it'll probably go a little faster today. It'll be really easy. I say that every time, and then I end up like, totally stretching class out longer than I think I will. So I'm gonna try to turn over a new leaf here and stop saying that as often. um, until I say it the next time. But so yeah, so that's kind of where we are headed for this first one here. I'm just trying to get my windows lined up because I'm like really OCD about that. Like that, and then let's bring us over here, and that should line everything up, and the world is good. Okay. So, chapter three, the psychology of exercise, right? If we go back to, first thing we want to start with is our blueprint. Major tasks, top three at the top here. We want to establish and maintain a professional client trainer relationship using techniques such as rapport building, active listening, and communication strategies. So, right out the gate, they're kind of talking about how the whole reason they even have an exercise psychology chapter is because like as a trainer, the things that are going to help you the most are your ability to build rapport with someone. So like your ability to connect with them, and like have a good conversation with them, and like make sure that they feel like you are in their corner, that's really big. Shantice, I'm sure, you work with clients. I mean, all of you guys actually have clients in some capacity. I mean, I guess Lisa, you're the newest to this, but like, so many of you guys are massaging and stuff. And so like your ability to like connect with someone and like have a good conversation pretty quickly is what like endears them to you, or endears you to them, I guess I should say. So like building rapport is absolutely huge. So a lot of like what the chapter kind of focuses on talking wise is like all of those skills that you can develop in terms of like conversation and active listening and stuff. Active listening, by the way, absolutely huge. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll spend some time. I'm a huge fan of that. And that's the hardest thing about like switching to like Zoom world, is it's really hard to like be a good active listener. It's so much easier to get like distracted and stuff. But I always tell people like a good way to think of like active listening is to think of it as like not only like listening, it's active engaging is one of the ways that I kind of like to think of it. That's like a term that I like to, it's not in your book, but as a term that I like to use. What I mean when I say active engaging is like, if I'm having a conversation with someone and they're talking to me, I am showing outward signs to them that I am listening to them. So there's like certain things you can do to make sure that like somebody knows you're listening. Part of it is eye contact. That's a really big one. Part of his body language, learning how to be more open rather than kind of closed off. I tend to, this is like kind of default position in life. I like to kind of sit like this, I'm a big arms crossed guy, We were, like I said, we went to Disney this weekend. And so like, there were definitely like, navigating crowds. I'm like this, not a big touchy-feely guy. But like if it's important to me that I want the person I'm talking to know that I'm listening to them, I make a conscious effort open my arms up. And so like it just seems like I'm receiving that information a little bit better. Body language is important. And then like it kind of pivoting into communication strategies, but also still talking about active listening. Another good way to be an active listener is to if you want somebody to immediately feel like they've been heard, repeat back to them what they said in your own language. There's two parts to that. Repeating, parroting is what they call it. If you're a parrot back to someone after something that they said, it instantly shows that like you listened and absorbed what they said. But also, if you change the words ever so slightly, it shows that is going to help you retain that information better, first off. But secondly, it's also going to show them that you are like taking that information in, and you're not just like, saying exactly the same thing. You're not literally parroting, but you are absorbing it in your version of language. So when you say it back to them, it shows them that like, oh, you're taking this information in. So for instance, like if somebody said like, yeah, I've just been having a really hard time making it to the gym lately. Like I just feel really overwhelmed about like, what's going on with my schedule. And because like my schedule's so overwhelming, I have less time to think about my workouts and like that's making it really hard for me to know what to do. And so I just get super overwhelmed while I'm going to the gym. So somebody says something like that, you can repeat back to them, what they're saying using some of that same language, but maybe describing it in a way that's a little bit different with like your experience as a professional. So you might say something like, okay. Oh, yeah. No, I totally hear that. There are times where like I get super, like busy with things, and it just helps to have like a quick, easy, blueprint that like shows me what to do in the gym because like sounds like you are overwhelmed in a way that like it's the thinking about things that is piling on. Having a plan of action that is just more like a checklist, so you don't have to actively think about stuff and knock it out might help you out. And now you're offering a solution to their problem. You're using some of the language that they used as you sort of repeat it back to them. And it just shows them that like you are listening to them, but you're also like as a professional working to like solve this problem. So that's a little bit of that. That's a good way to actively listen, guys. And it's also a good dating strategy. If you're on a date, you want to make sure that that person feels like you are listening to them. Repeat back some of the things that they're saying. It's a really good way to show someone that you are actively engaged. And then we want to be able to develop and continuously reevaluate short and long-term goals in collaboration with a client based on the outcome of assessments. Yeah, basically, like we're gonna teach you guys the difference between like our long-term and short-term goals. I know we've done that in previous classes before, but talking about like helping our clients, reevaluate their goals sometimes is a big part of what we do as well. Um, because good Lord, your clients will make some bad goals. Like they're like, I want to lose 50 pounds by Friday. I'm like, we can do that, but we are going to have to chop off a limb. Like, you're gonna need to lose a leg.
Right.
Not that it's not possible, but like that is you'll hear some like stuff like that sometimes. You'll get like unrealistic ones of, it's like I want to work out like 6 days a week. It's like, oh wow, like have you ever exercised before? Been on an exercise routine before? Do you exercise a lot now? It's like, nope, first time ever. And it's like, okay, like that's a lot. It's like you are gonna be real sore real quick, and honestly, that's probably gonna be super overwhelming. Or like I'll get the big one that I get a lot, that you guys are gonna get a lot, trust me, is like they're like, I want to get on a new exercise routine, I want to change my diet, I want to sleep better, I want to do that, and they'll have like 50 things that are all healthy. They're all buzz words and buzz topics that you'll find on social media posts like you gotta get sleep, you gotta eat better, you gotta be active. I want to meditate in the mornings, I want to do my, what's the ultimate morning routine. So like with that, like, a lot of times it's like, hey, let's just start with a couple like really tiny short-term goals, master those, and we'll implement. By the time we've mastered all of these goals, like little tiny things, the change that you will have experienced will be massive, you know? Um, just a little sidetrack here, getting a little off topic. If you guys ever get a chance, a really great book, Atomic Habits. Really, really terrific book. It's by a guy named James Clear, and just a book about habits. It's actually my second favorite habit book. My favorite habit book is The Power of Habit. Um, but really, The Power of Habit is really just one big tool. It's like classical
Are you
conditioning.
talking about the book by Charles Duhigg?
Yes, it is.
That's funny. I read that book.
Have you finished this one already?
No, I'm like two chapters out.
Oh man, it's so good. What I love about him is how he has like a different story for all of like the things he's talking about. I think that's just a really good read. You know what I mean? Where he's like the Febreze story. I love the Febreze story. The gambling story. I hate the gambling story. Like it's so stressful, guys. There's this chapter talking about how um like near wins are lightning in your brain. And so like Vegas changed their habits. And you know, they still legally have to pay out the same amount. Like that's like required by like, you know, it's like set by the state, right, in terms of how much gambling. So like slot machines have to like, but they don't have to be entirely random. They have to win a certain percentage of time. That's required. But they are allowed to put whatever losses however they want. So they start putting like near wins where it's like bar, cherry. And it's like, oh, I almost won. They are allowed to do that as much as they want. And it is like some people's brains see that they live through it the same as if it was winning, even though it was a loss. And so it just creates this like intense, you know, reward system feedback loop. Hate that chapter. That chapter is real stressful. Because he tells a story about a woman who becomes like a gambling addict. Um, but yeah, I that's awesome, Shantiz. This is actually like my favorite. This is my favorite like self-help style, you know, self-improvement book. This is my number top of my list. But
I agree.
if you want a really good follow-up, check out Atomic Habits. I think Atomic Habits is a more
I have
bold.
that one too.
Oh, do you have it or have read it?
I've read that one.
Oh, okay. See, I think this read is more boring personally. Um, But I will say, its lessons are, I think, a little bit more applicable to average people. And it's just like one of those lessons, guys. The reason we're here is that just like learning like realistic short-term goals, super helpful. And he talks about this idea of like if you just change, you know, a little bit, you know, like a little bit at a time, a little bit, and you look at that over the course of like you zoom out and look over the course of a year, you've made massive changes to your life. And that I
So
think is super applicable. So that part of that
that
book.
one's a really good one. Atomic Habits, yeah, by James Clear. And then Emotional Intelligence by Daniel
Mm,
Goleman's a really good one. And The
I read
12
that.
Rules of Life by Jordan B. Peterson. Yeah, I like the emotional intelligence one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, love that. If you want a good follow-up to Charles Duhigg, his next one, he's got three. I haven't read his newest book, but um, Smarter, Better, Faster.
I
This is a
have
really
that
good
one too.
one. I didn't like it as much. I thought it was kind of it applies really well to like the corporate world.
Oh,
Uh,
see, I didn't read it yet. I just downloaded it to put in my queue for later, but I haven't put it on to listen to it.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it does the same thing where he tells like an interesting story based on like each concept. But he instead of focusing on habits, he focuses on like a ton of different things in this book. And they're all very like corporate synergy kind of stuff, which is really cool, really fascinating. But like, I don't plan on being a CEO anytime soon, so I didn't like it as much, but it still had some really, really cool stuff in it. Had a really great story about the lady who wrote Frozen. That story is really, really cool. So that's awesome. I'll have to check out the emotional intelligence. I love stuff like that. Um, okay, anyway, so going through the blueprint here, the reason I love talking about that book is short-term goals, just little tiny changes, guys. It really doesn't take so many people want these like massive big changes in their life, and it's like what they don't realize is that those massive big changes, they don't actually require massive big action. They require little actions, but consistently, you know? Um, so we'll talk a little about that. And then our other goal of, mastering this chapter is to facilitate lifestyle and behavior change through education, monitoring, and communication strategies. So education is basically kind of what we're doing right now. Like we want you guys to develop some skills in terms of like talking to your clients and helping them sort of understand these concepts better, and educating them on, things that are very effective and things that are maybe not so effective. Monitoring, which is huge, both self-monitoring and coach monitoring are going to be important. Like my job as a coach is oftentimes to keep track of like my clients like weights that they're lifting and things like that. But tracking that and showing that to them is huge. But I'm always also encouraging them to do self-monitoring because self-monitoring is always going to be way more powerful, because self-monitoring is how they are going to that's how they are going to, see those changes themselves. One of my favorite stories that is in a book like this is all about it's a book called Intuitive Eating. It's a bit more of like a diet help psychology book. And one of my favorite stories in there is this like fake experiment that they did, which so many freaking psychological experiments are like they don't tell you what they're actually testing for. Like psychologists are like the sneakiest scientists out there because they have to be. They don't if you like because once you know something, you'll start to skew data. So many stories when you're reading about like psychology are like, yeah, we did this, and then this group didn't know what we were actually testing for, which was this. But they basically had two groups of people, and they were like, hey, in about 8 weeks, we're going to put all of you on a diet. Right. And they didn't, people didn't know, they didn't tell them that they were the test group, they didn't tell them they were a control group. They were just like, everybody in here, we're going to go on a diet in about 8 weeks. So all of you are going to go into the other room in a minute and you're going to meet with a psychologist who's going to help you, tell you what your next steps are in terms of like getting ready to go on this diet. And so the control group goes into the next room and they're like, all right, so in about 8 weeks, we're going to have a follow-up. We're going to give you a call and, schedule an appointment. That's it. And they're like, oh, great. We'll see you in 8 weeks. So they like leave. And that's the control group. So they weren't told to do anything. They weren't, aware of anything. But the test group they brought in and they said, okay, so for the next 8 weeks, because you're going to go on this very fancy diet, we need to know what you're eating now. So for the next 8 weeks, we want you to food journal. I think it might have been 4 weeks, actually, not 8 weeks. Anyway, for the next length of time, we want you to food journal. And so all of those people were told like they were going to be a part of an experiment in 4 to 8 weeks or whatever it was. But until they were part of the experiment, they needed a food journal. What they were actually testing was, does food journaling help you lose weight? And so like these people weren't told to modify their diet at all. They were told that they were gonna go on a diet. Now, actually, here's what I think is really interesting. I always love when scientists find something they're not looking for. One thing they found is that both the control group and the test group actually lost weight, which is really interesting. So the conclusion there is probably that even the anticipation of going on a diet on a set date in the future is enough to get you to change some of your habits. I think that's really fascinating. But that's not what they were looking for. What they found is that the group that was told to food journal lost way more weight. Now, again, neither group was told to change anything. But the group that food journaled, all it did was just bring awareness to what they were eating every day. And so all of a sudden, the more they started, they were like, is that really how many Oreos I have every day? Or is that really how often I go to fast food? And so it went from being very unconscious thinking to very conscious, right in the front of their brain, forward thinking. And that was enough to get people to be like, ooh, I probably shouldn't go to McDonald's that often. I really thought it was only like once a month. It turns out it was like once a week, you know. So then that gets them to change their habit. And so they changed their habits, and that resulted in interesting amounts of weight loss. So I love that study. I think it's a really fun one. You can find it in the book Intuitive Eating. They'll talk about it, but just the idea of being more forward. So, monitoring can be huge. And then again, communication strategies. We're coming back to this idea of like, how do you talk to your clients and, how do we reevaluate and help them? So those are the overall big tasks of these 2 chapters. That's what they want you to come away from it with. I will say, the tasks bit isn't necessarily something that you're memorizing for test prep. But I do like to cover it just like we did on the first day. I like knowing what the tasks are because it kind of gives you an idea of like what the feel is that NASM's going for. It's like, when you think about it, it's like, why is there a chapter on this? Why is there a chapter on that? Why is there a chapter on this? Right? The tasks bit kind of gives you a perspective on like how NASM is thinking. And hopefully that will help, that will translate to you, knowing better how to filter for the actual exam prep. So that's it. Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things today. We only got 8 major concepts to kind of go over in our blueprint. This is normally where I like to follow something like that up with the sentence like, this is going to be easy. And I'm trying not to say that anymore. All right. So let's start with K20 here. Communication methods and strategies, talking about verbal, but also non-verbal communication. That's interesting. That's a weird place for this to start. Whatever. So when we're talking about like communicating with our clients, right? I gotta find that. We'll get there in a little bit. Yeah, okay. Listening. Where's my listening? Seriously, do I not have that? Oh, is it my... It might be a chapter 4 thing. That actually could be the problem here. There we go. Okay, so yeah, see, that is a weird place to start. They're starting in chapter 4. So we want to talk about 2 terms, active or sometimes referred to as like reflective listening. Both of these are real. Both these are really big. There we go. So when we are communicating with our clients, right? Big communication methods that you want to sort of master. We've got our verbal and nonverbal communication. We also have active and reflective listening, right? So when it comes to like, communication, obviously there's verbal communication. Everybody in here is super familiar with the idea of like verbal communication. It's like, hey, Aaron, I need you to go to the store and pick up grape juice. Verbal communication, super easy. I told you exactly what to do, right? But there is also like the non-verbal communication that kind of comes through when it comes to communicating. One big one is that people don't think about sometimes is like timing. Like timing is a way to communicate, and people like I think this is I think this is the hardest. I'm using this as our first example, even though it's in my opinion, I think it's the hardest one to understand. Here's what I mean when I say timing is a version of communication, right? So let's say, right, you are in a relationship with a significant other, and that significant other is not particularly good at like doing the dishes, right? Like let's say like that's the big thing, right? Like it's kind of a constant like, sort of like a thing that maybe the 2 of you argue about, something like that, right? So let's say, right, you're out and about in the world, something happens, right? And your significant other says like, hey, don't forget this weekend we have like this thing going on. So like we're gonna have to make sure that like you move your car before like this happens, right? So something like that. And so like you are now like they're bringing up this thing, and what they're focused on is like this particular event that's coming up and doing all the things that are like prep for that event, right? Now, you were given a task, and in the back of your head, there's always this like little bit of thing of like, like this is like something that needs to happen. And you'd have this sort of confrontation moment. If you bring it up right now, it is communicating two things. Number one, it is communicating that you are competing with your significant other. So it is communicating that like, hey, I'm asking you to do this thing. Yeah, but there's this thing that you always do, that's also kind of annoying. So like, I just want to like hit you back with that. So now, like, timing wise, it is not the right time to bring this up. What that communicates is that like you are in conflict with them over this thing that has nothing to do with what they were talking about. So timing can sometimes be a bit of an issue, and but it is like a way that we communicate. And then the other thing that it also like communicates is I am not listening to what you are saying. And like your thing of giving me this task right now is less important to me. What's more important to me is this like other thing, right? And to be fair, that could be true. There's nothing wrong with you maybe finding something else more important. But bringing it up right now and having bad timing with it is a really good way to get into an argument. So you think that you are just communicating something that has nothing to do with something else, when in fact what you're communicating is what you want is unimportant to me. What I want is this other thing, or that, you're just telling me that because you want to attack me. Well, here's my counterattack, right? So timing is huge. Timing is a version of what we call nonverbal communication. Now, that's probably not something that's going to necessarily come up too often with your clients, although it is definitely still part of it. A better example of nonverbal communication rather than that is the classic like body language, right? Body language is huge. Making eye contact with someone is a version of communication that says like, hey, what you have to say to me, is important to you. And because it's important to you, it's important to me. So I'm going to give you all of my attention. And that's why we want to make sure that we try to make as much eye contact with people as possible. If your client is telling you, hey, like this is really hard for me, like, I'm really struggling on the way here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the next set. And you're just like kind of listening to them like, yeah, that's tough. All right, you ready for your next set? Let's do this. You know what I mean? Like I'm completely checked out on my phone here. And it's easy to do. It's one of the reasons why I try not to have my phone come out of my pocket at all during my session. Guys, pro tip for you all, and I know some of you already do this, but if you don't, this right here is like the best tool in the world for me. I do get easily sucked into my phone. I have a phone addiction problem. Like it's an immediate source of all of the knowledge in the freaking universe so far. Like it is a great way to stay in touch. I can be in conversation with multiple people simultaneously, which is, a very cool thing. It's easy to get sucked into your phone. So I really try super hard not to allow that to happen during my training sessions. The thing that helped, but I need a stopwatch. I need a timer for my clients like rest periods and stuff. So if I'm using my phone, I'm opening it up, I'm constantly just like getting on it. And if I'm using this for a timer, it's probably going to pull me away and it's probably going to distract me. Now, I will sometimes use this. If I'm doing like a Tabata or if I'm doing like HIIT training or something like that, and my intervals are going to go off like 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. If it's just like if the numbers are moving around and I have like a pre-programmed interval thing, sure, I might use my phone, but I try specifically not to because I know I have the bad habit of getting sucked into my phone. So having an actual stopwatch on your wrist or just like if you don't want to, you go get like the one with the string that you can hang around your neck and then just tie it around your wrist and walk around with it. Those are really, really great. But just get a freaking stopwatch. It is a trainer's absolute number one best friend. That is jokingly when I tell people, like trainers who are building their gyms, they're like, "What's the first piece of equipment I could get?" If you got the space, a squat rack. But no, first thing I would tell people is get a stopwatch. Like that sounds so silly, but it is a huge tool. Um, because if you are in your phone, you are non-verbally communicating to your client. You are telling them that it is whatever they have going on is less important than literally anything else, right? There's a really great line in a Pete Holmes special. He's a comedian. He has a really great line where he's talking about he's like looking around the audience. He's doing just like a little bit of crowd work. And he's like, and then there's this guy, he's got his phone sitting on the table, face up. It's like the beacon of Gondor, like every time it lights up, he's like, it's just shining because he's on stage, he's looking out into a dark audience. And like every time this phone goes on, he's like, it's like a beacon's been lit. And he's like, but the line that I like about it is he goes, just in case anything else comes up. Like, don't get me wrong. I get that like one reason somebody could have their phone on them is because like maybe their grandmother's sick, maybe they're in the hospital and they need that communication immediately. Totally. But that is not how people think. That is totally not what people are considering. Like when people are thinking about communication, what they think is that that phone is more like the minor Candy Crush notification of like, hey, you haven't played in 4 hours is more important than anything I have to say. Like that's what it feels like. So that's a big part of nonverbal communication, guys. Make sure you are killing the phones during your sessions and try to engage in active listening. Active listening is listening where you are actively conveying to the speaker that you are engaged and paying direct attention. So think of active listening, guys, as showing listening. like I'm in a conversation with Trisha, I want to show her that I am listening. That's what I mean when I say active listening. Frank's talking to me, I want him to know that I'm listening, right? He can't hear what I hear, right? Man, my mom was the queen of calling me out for being bad at active listening when I was a kid. I was really good, guys. I was really good at doing that thing that little kids will do. Any of you out there who with your teens or preteens, you ever do that thing where it's like, hey, listen to me, and then your kid will repeat back to you exactly what you said? I don't know if that happens, but I was amazing at that. My mom would be like, hey, I need you to clean your room and then take the trash out and then go do the dishes, right? And I'd be on, whatever, playing on not my phone because I didn't have a phone back then, but probably playing some type of video game on a console or something, goofing off. And she'd be like, hey, what did I just say? And I was like, you said I need to clean my room and then I need to take the trash out and then I need to do the dishes. And I'd be like, oh, daughter, and she'd be like, she's like, yeah, you heard me, but you didn't listen to me. And she's like, how long? And then she would follow it up with some question about like, how long do you think that's going to take? And in my little kid brain, I was like 5 minutes. Because it only took her 5 seconds to tell me what she needed to do. So in my brain, it was very quick. And then she was like, when I actually heard her and paid attention, I was like, oh yeah, that's going to take time before dinner. So I should probably start working on that now. She was amazing at that. My mom was really, really, really good at that. So yeah, nonverbal communication is a big part of like that active listening, right? Making eye contact, reflecting on what the speaker is saying, right? Literally taking it in and maybe repeating back to them what they said. That is huge. Asking questions, right? Asking questions related to what your client is saying is a really good version. That's verbal communication, but still absolutely huge, right? So we have our verbal, we have our nonverbal. Both that is big. One term that I think I really like that they started throwing into this version of the textbook is this idea of reflective listening, which is seeking to understand the meaning of the speaker's words, right? So again, like, let's say somebody says something to me, I hear it, and then I repeat back to them, so what you're saying is, and then whatever I follow that up with in my own terms, it just really clarifies that I'm paying good attention. So there is at the start what a speaker means, but not everybody is the most eloquent, well-spoken person in the world. So what they actually say is not always perfectly accurate to that. And then there's what the listener actually, says. So then there's what the listener hears, which is maybe a little bit different. So we're already like down the telephone line a little bit. And then there's what the listener kind of thinks the speaker actually means, which is like interpretation. Um, so that's the idea of this idea of like reflective listening, right? It's this idea that like you need to kind of have an understanding that not everybody is the greatest communicator in the world. Um, here's a great story that we had to tell this weekend. I want to give you guys a really good example of me not being a very good active listener, but then turning it around, or not being a very good like communicator, but then turning it around. So like with with my wife on our first date, it was a train wreck. I we took her I took her to she was just visiting LA. She's new to the city. And so I took her to the Formosa Cafe, which is on La Brea. And I was like, great. And then afterwards, we'll like walk to, there's got to be something nearby, which there's really not. Like, there's like a mall next to it. There's really not anything that's like that good of within walking distance. Um, but during dinner, she like mentions that she's like a big like Lance Bass fan, and I was like, his bar is down the street. Maybe we'll see him. His bar is in deep WeHo, West Hollywood, which is 3.5, 4 miles away. Like, but my brain was like, it's the next most interesting thing. So I didn't bother to even look it up. I didn't even bother to, map it. And I'm like, we'll walk, it'll be great. So we start walking. We're about 3/4 of a mile in, and I'm like getting nervous. So I pull out my phone and I'm like, we are still 2 miles away. I was like, ooh, we should take an Uber. And she's like, no, you drove. Like, we'll just take your car. And I was like, we should really take an Uber. She was like, what? So we go back, and my car had been stolen before this. And so it was covered in black spray paint, which is why I didn't want to take my car. The inside had been detailed recently, so it was lovely, but it definitely looked weird. It looked like a dairy cow, so I used to call it the cow car. And so that was like a very weird thing already. Not super stoked on that. But we drive and we go out, and then I like park, I let her out of the car, and she's going up, and I had a great time. I loved this date. So I'm there on my phone. She's a big musical theater gal. So I'm looking up the perfect like musical theater quote from Hamilton, like because I know if I mess up the quote, she's gonna know it. And so I'm like, oh, what is it? Now, me looking down on my phone, she always thought the most romantic thing you can do is like if the guy looks back and watches you into your door, that means they're interested. And there's me on my phone, not looking at her, not communicating that I am interested. And so she's kind of like, okay, like
You
clearly,
failed, Brad. You failed.
yeah, she's like, oh, he's just not interested. So she texts me later, and meanwhile, I'm like, I had a great time tonight. Like, I loved this. Send her the quote. She actually did call me out too. She goes, you didn't even look back. And I was like, I was looking up a quote. So she is, text me. She's like, hey, it was really nice, but I was getting more like friend vibes than I was getting like romantic vibes. I'm only here temporarily anyways. If you're interested in like hanging out again, it would probably be as friends. And so I texted her back. I was like, hey, respectfully, I have enough friends. I'm not really interested in making any more friends, but I would love to take you out again for the chance to change your mind. So I was able to say, like, I do not want to do the friend thing, but I am romantically interested, and I would love to like have one more opportunity to change your mind. So that communicated that I was very clearly interested. And so I was able to use my words and be a very clear communicator. But my nonverbal communication, guys, nearly ruined my chances. Our second date and third date were also, or our second date was also a train wreck. Uh, but and skipping a bunch of stuff that went bad on that second date. We were sitting there at this like thing, and I was like, I wanted to like directly address the whole friend vibes thing, and I was like, so you say I'm clearly giving out friend vibes. I very clearly do not want to do that. What do I need to do to, indicate to you that I am romantically interested? And she goes, now I want to remind you, this was during COVID. So things were just opening up. And she goes, well, first off, you can sit. So there was a chasm between the two of us. I was sitting on the complete other side of this like round booth. And she was like, you could try sitting over here. And I was like, okay, duly noted. So yeah, I may not be smooth, but my good communication skills can make up for it. So that is again why communication is so important. Um, active listening techniques. One, asking questions. Directly asking your client, hey, what is it that you need from me? That can be very effective. That's a version of asking questions. Or just taking the time to actively ask questions and reflect on what your client is saying. And like, so it's like, oh, wow, yeah, that sounds hard. Like listening to your client and saying something, maybe they're going through like something hard and you go, that sounds difficult. That's reflective. Or summarizing for your client, right? That's the one I like to say. So what you're saying is, blah, right? And you lay it all out. Affirming is another really good one. This is the one that I think people do a little more naturally. I think a lot of you are probably already pretty good at affirming. You'll hear, your friend will be unloading on you saying something, that they're going through, and you're going like, yeah, oh my gosh, I know, yeah, 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 right, like that kind of thing. That's good, but the whole like yeah, yeah, yeah thing, I don't think is a great version of active listening, but I do think it's where it starts. I think that's the natural one we're all sort of born with. And then asking permission is actually really helpful. And so like sometimes like rather than just like jumping in, look, you're going to be the expert in the relationship with your clients. You are the fitness expert, you're the nutrition expert, you're the coaching expert, right? But you got to avoid that instinct of like jumping in like immediately, every time like they say something that might be a little like false. They're like, yeah, and so I thought maybe it'd be a really good idea for me to do this. And it's like, oh, actually, like that's actually not very effective. Rather than just like jumping in all the time and cutting your client off, that's going to get them to slow down communicating. They're not going to be able to do that as well. So instead, just taking a second to be like, if I might chime in here, like taking a second like that, or just saying like, do you mind if I address that last thing that you said? Right? Just asking for permission and like jump before you jump in on stuff like that. Really helpful to just like keep your client communicating, and it becomes more like a game of tennis rather than a game of, I don't know, somebody's lined up with paintballs. It's a back and forth rally, which is what we want. So we're big on that. Now, another thing you want to mention, another thing they mention here when it comes to not necessarily like active listening, but like when it comes to just like coaching in general, is you also want to learn how to ask open-ended questions rather than closed-ended questions. Now, this is I actually don't see open-ended up here. I'm surprised. I guess it's a little bit more in here. When it comes to like open-ended, that's like part of the whole, where are you? Communication strategies. So one of our communication strategies that you also want to employ, guys, is learning how to ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions get your client talking. Closed-ended questions are like a dead-end one-way street, like a dead-end one-way street, you're never going to get to leave. That's the Hotel California of streets. You know what I mean? a closed-ended question is something like, do you prefer to work out at home or a fitness facility? Right? A closed-ended question is a question that can be answered in one or two like words, right? They can say at home. Like that did not really start a question, right? Versus like an open-ended question, which is going to encourage conversations, right? We want to encourage conversation. So, what are you prepared to do to reach your goal? That's a question that could be answered, in minutes. You can talk for a while about that. It's like, well, I'm prepared to do this, and I want to change this in my life, right? That's going to get somebody talking. Or, how might you go about making this change that you want to make, right? Or like even just simple open-ended questions of like, what are your favorite type of things to do in the gym? What are you looking for in a workout program? Um, those types of things that are going to sort of invite conversation. That's how you're going to build rapport with somebody. They used to spend a lot more time talking about open and closed-ended questions in the textbook. This was like there used to be a much better. I will say the one thing we kind of lost in in the seventh edition is like there was a lot there was a fifth edition NASM, and that fifth edition textbook was honestly god awful. It was so bad actually that they wrote the sixth edition in less than a year because they needed to like get it going. And the way they were able to write in less than a year is they literally just reverted back to the fourth edition textbook, um, and then just put a new cover on it. I mean that literally. So like I was teaching at Sochi, I could use my fourth edition and go page 612, and somebody with the sixth edition could go to 612 and it would be the same pages. Same sentence, same paragraph. Word for word identical. That's how bad the fifth edition was. So I had to revert. But I will say this, the fifth edition, one thing that they did really well in it is they talked about sales. So it was like as if someone took all the science out of the NASM textbook, still asked the science questions in the exam, but that person was not a scientist, and they were like a really good salesman. That's what it felt like. So fifth was really rough, but the thing that it did super, super well is spent time giving you examples and talking about open and closed-ended questions and how that's a really great way. If you are trying to be like a salesperson, you're trying to build rapport with someone and get that person to like connect with you. Asking the type like targeted questions is a really effective way to do that. So active listening again. Your client says something, reflect on that statement and say, okay, yeah, I get that, right? Summarize what it is that they're saying, right? So there's a couple different ways to summarize. There's like collecting summaries, which is like, so you said this, 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 and this, right? Like bullet points. There's linking summaries, which is like, oh, so you said this. That's similar to what you were saying in your last paragraph, right? Or like when we were talking yesterday and you mentioned this is like linked up. And then your client goes, yeah, exactly, right? That gives you a deeper understanding, shows them that you are listening. And then transitional summaries are kind of trickier, but a transitional summary is like, okay, so you're saying all these things. How do we take all of this like clearly very emotional feeling and use that as like motivation to this thing that you also said you want to accomplish, right? Transitional summaries are a little tough, but basically the idea is that you are taking in what your client said and you are tying it to it's kind of like a linking summary in a way, but you're tying it to maybe like a goal, or it's like, or like I'm sure you guys have had friends who are just like going through an emotionally hard time, and they'll vent and they'll vent and they'll vent and they'll vent and they'll vent, and sometimes after a while you should totally let them vent, get out there, get all those emotions out. But sometimes after a while it's like, okay, now, how do we transition into feeling better? We've done the emotional hard part. Now, how do we turn this into, the good stuff? It's like you complained about your boyfriend for a very long time. Now, what do we do to get them to be better? That's your transitional summary. Um, And then affirming, right? Again, saying, I know what you're going through is really hard, or like, I hear that, right? Or, or it is, I'm using a lot of like negative emotion examples today, but, like sometimes saying things like, yeah, no, that's really exciting, right? That's affirming. And then again, ask for permission. Just ask for permission before you like jump in on your client. It's just a helpful way to make sure that like you're actually bantering. Um, Now, I will say you don't have to do that constantly. Like that'd be really weird if you're having a conversation with somebody like, "Can I talk now? Can I talk now?" No, that's not what I mean. But just if you are going to change the subject, don't just change the subject randomly. Like ask permission, and just say like, be like, "Yeah, if I might weigh in on that, and this could pivot us away from this conversation, but it sounds like," and then you can say your piece. So that's a pretty good chunk on active listening and verbal/slash nonverbal communication. All of that, guys, the better you are at communicating like that, the more rapport you're going to build. And I will say, I don't know if I got the definition of rapport up here yet, but we should go over that definition. Rapport is a big word they want you to know. Rapport. And it is a relationship in which two people understand each other's ideas, have respect for one another, and communicate well. I like that definition. I like the old definition a little bit better. Rapport is the level of trust one person has in another person. So you want your clients to trust you. You want your clients to trust that you have their best interests at heart. But yeah, it's a relationship in which you respect and communicate well. That's building rapport. Okay, let's pivot a little bit out of that and talk about old types. Their G for some reason is clear. Anybody see that? So let's talk about old goal types. So we want to talk about a couple different goals here. The first one we're going to talk about is SMART goals. Then we want to cover short and long-term goals, lifetime goals, which are like the really long term, and then talk about the difference between process and outcome goals. All of these are good, by the way. So I do want to just kind of clearly before we get started, when we're talking about goals, guys, every one of these is a good goal type. You just want to make sure that you are using them effectively. So a SMART goal, for instance, is not necessarily um, a specific category of goal. Like a short-term goal is like a category, right? Something that can be completed in a short period of time. A long-term goal is something completed in a long time. A lifetime goal is like a really long time. So those are goal types, and all of them can be very good. Process goals are goals that make you better at like a specific process. So like let's say like a running goal. So actually like an outcome goal is like a specific outcome. So like Trisha, you said it was your sister, I think this morning, ran her first 5K this weekend.
Yes.
Yeah. So her goal of completing a 5K, that's an outcome goal. She has a specific outcome. She wants to achieve it. You know what I mean? But there's also like what got her there is probably a bunch of like process goals. Probably just like maybe she doesn't necessarily have to do a certain amount of mileage, but maybe just getting out the door and consistently going jogging 3 days a week, 4 days a week, something like that, getting better at the process, right? Or even like on a run, my buddy Patrick was the master of process goals. He would be like, I'm going to complete one of his process goals he wanted was to be able to do Fryman Canyon. Well, I guess this is an outcome. He wanted to be able to do Fryman Canyon from start to finish without having to walk at any point. So he wanted to run the whole thing because it's all very uphill. So
Right.
his outcome was like the outcome of being able to run it from point A to point B. But what's funny is like we would be I'd go with him on a run every now and then, and he would be running with these like little itty bitty steps. And he would be in a run in the sense that he was jumping from foot to foot, At one point, there was like no foot contact. He was leaping. That's what a run is. A walk is there's always one foot in contact with the ground at any time. But I was like, you would be faster walking. Like his steps were so small that he was, because he was trying to conserve energy because he was exhausted.
Right.
But he was like, it's not about that. He was like, I know that I would be faster to walk. And it would be physically, he's like, but I'm just trying to master the idea that I'm not ever losing what is a jog. And at first I was like, just take the faster walk. But then I kind of realized like what he was aiming towards. It wasn't about his time. It wasn't about how fast he ran, Ryman. It was about like he was trying to accomplish this thing. He was getting better at the process of running.
Yes.
It was really cool. It was really like that was an eye-opener moment for me. I think of that a lot whenever I'm teaching the differences between these goals. So these are good. These are also good. There's nothing wrong with those. But one thing you want to do when you're making any goals, whether it's long, short, lifetime, process, or outcome, is you want to run your goal through the SMART goal system first. And what I mean by a SMART goal is that's a very intelligent goal. It's not what I mean. I mean that it sort of meets the criteria laid out here in the SMART system. Now, I will say this, guys. Remember, this is a really short 2-chapter domain, right? 2 chapters, 15% of your test. This whole SMART goal thing here, this is an acronym, SMART. So you're probably definitely, for sure, gonna get a question that is, which of the following is the definition for the A in SMART goals? You know what I mean? Like you're gonna get a question like that. So knowing the difference between these goal types is huge. But the SMART goal system, it's a goal setting system designed to improve the likelihood of goals being achieved by making them more specific. That's the S in SMART goals, actually. Quantifiable, which really just means measurable, and achievable, which means that like your goal is both actually doable, like realistic, and also like specifically achievable. What we mean when we say like achievable is that like, let's say you told a stranger your goal, they should know pretty much immediately what you mean. Like that's a good idea of it, right? A good example of a what I think is like not a very achievable goal is the goal of getting rich. Now that sounds really weird when I say that, because obviously there are rich people out there. A lot of Nepo babies. No, I'm kidding. No, when I say like getting rich is not very achievable, what I mean is you didn't actually define for me what rich means. You know what I mean? Like I don't know, like how do you know when you've attained richness, right? Because it's too vague. It's not specific. Because it didn't meet the other criteria of being specific and measurable, I don't really know what you mean. Because having $100 in your wallet, just $100 bill, is rich compared to like somebody who has, nothing, right? So it's not a very, but if you told me you wanted to be a millionaire, you wanted to have $1 million in an account, right? Somewhere, right? $1 million, that is an attainable, achievable goal because now like we both know exactly what you mean. Whereas like your definition of rich, my definition of rich could totally be different, right? I want to get healthy. Ugh, I don't like that goal. Which sounds crazy for a trainer to say, But what I mean when I say I don't like it is I just don't think it's a very actionable, attainable, achievable goal. Because I don't like you tell me, like, you want to get healthy? Great. How do you know when you're done? How do you know when you've met your goal? Now, obviously, like health is a lifelong thing. But like, if you have this goal, goals are these things that we try to accomplish. How do you know when you have accomplished your goal? If it's not very attainable or actionable, like You're never going to know. So a SMART goal is a system that it's basically a checklist. So when we look back at these, right, short-term goals, you want to run your short-term goal through the SMART goal system and just check to see, is it going to be effective? Your long-term goals, run them through the SMART goal system. Is it going to be effective? So just pivoting really quickly, just because SMART goals are so big. Let's see if this works. Yeah, there we go. Wait, actually, hold on. That's what I want. So let's kind of go over like what we mean when we say like SMART goals in particular. I think there might be an NASM video for this. Or I might be thinking, yeah.
There's a saying in
Or is that the adherence one? This is the adherence video. This is different. Nope, no, it's not. Okay. Sorry. I don't know what part of my brain will eventually memorize which video is which, but I need to develop it. All right, here we go. This is gonna go through a couple of other strategies as well. But I'm gonna pause this. I lied. I'm not gonna stop this. This is not on YouTube, so ain't nobody gonna flag this video. All right, but I am gonna put me in the background here. And here we go.
There's a saying in show business, leave them wanting more. In our case, as CPTs, we have to think along those same lines to keep our clients consistently coming back. Working out may not be as entertaining as a blockbuster movie, but it is pretty exciting when you break through the barriers to exercise and create a client for life. If a person has purchased a gym membership or even better, personal training sessions, it's a pretty good bet that they really do intend on making exercise part of their life. However, good intentions don't necessarily mean they'll stick with it. Truth is, people tend to overestimate how often they think they're going to exercise. One study found that gym members who predicted they would exercise 3 times or more per week ended up only exercising 1.39 times per week. I don't actually know what 1.39 times would look like, but hey, that's what the study said, and you get the point. Behavior change techniques that can help clients act on their intentions to exercise can be beneficial. So let's dig into all the strategies you can use to create that consistent, healthy client behavior. First, it's on you to stretch your knowledge. Don't be intimidated. Behavior change techniques and how to apply them to real-life situations may sound technical and even confusing, but don't overthink it. You're probably already using some of these techniques without knowing that you are. Like when you boost a client's confidence by convincing them that they can lift a certain weight, you're already using a behavior change technique to modify self-efficacy. There are several different techniques that you can use to keep your clients in the program. Self-regulatory techniques have been identified as important to helping individuals adopt exercise regimens and associate it with positive outcomes. CPTs also need to make the exercise experience enjoyable while enhancing the client's self-efficacy. So there's a science to this, but keep it fun. CPTs also need to understand how to help clients set goals. Goals represent the what that sits at the crossroads of how and why. Pretty good phrase, right? But those aren't just catchy words you can stitch on a pillow. The why represents a client's values, and how represents the way the goal will be achieved. It's important for fitness professionals and clients to understand and verbalize why a goal is important. And if the goal is a bit unrealistic for your client's stage, it's important to manage expectations along the way. Incorporating SMART goal setting techniques can help your client develop sound goals that they can accomplish. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And these goals can be very effective. CPT should encourage clients to match their behaviors to their goals. Bigger goals can be broken down into sub-goals and make them well-defined and trackable. Encourage your clients to write down their goals and refer back to them often. Maybe put them somewhere they'll see them every day, like on the refrigerator or bathroom mirror. This all starts at the very first meeting with a new client. Initial goal setting sessions should be focused on developing long-term goals based on their personal values. To set overarching long-term goals, you can ask things like, what do you want to accomplish in the next 6 months? Or, what does success in fitness look like to you? Achievable short-term goals, building to long-term goals, is at the heart of focusing your client's attention. Again, just make sure the goals are specific. I want to lose 5 pounds as opposed to just, I want to lose weight. Measurable. Make sure progress is being measured objectively and tracked over time with hard data. And be sure there are attainable goals. If a goal is too easy, the client may not put in sufficient effort. If it's too challenging, they may get discouraged. The most effective goals are going to be realistic and relevant to the client's life. Even though something may be technically possible, it may not be possible for a particular client when viewed in the context of his or her lifestyle. Finally, it has to be timely. To properly measure and track goals, they need to have specific timeframes with frequent check-ins. If a goal fails to meet any of the SMART criteria, it will likely fail to meet the needs of the client. That can lead to the exact thing we don't want, with falling off the fitness wagon. Another important thing to remember is there's a difference between outcome and process goals. Outcome goals are just the consequences. They represent the final achievement that hard work will inevitably lead to. For example, your client's outcome goal may be to win a 10K race competition within 1 year. A process goal is more about the daily and weekly steps you have to take to get to that final outcome. So once an outcome goal has been set, process goals should be created that speak to how they're going to achieve that outcome. Going back to our example, your client might set a process goal to jog for 1 hour, 3 days per week, and attend 2 personal training sessions per week. That's attainable, and every small win they have with the process goal will build their confidence as they go. That is essentially enhancing self-efficacy. Lots of techniques have been shown to do this. If a client improves on any metric of fitness, it's important to give them positive feedback and praise. This kind of positive feedback enhances confidence by focusing on all the little victories in the process. This is particularly important in the beginning stages of behavior change when the client is still probably feeling a little unsure of themselves. Encouraging social support can also enhance a client's sense of control over exercise. When a person feels supported by others, it may help them cope with any setbacks or obstacles as well. Planning can also help translate intentions to behavior. To stick with a plan, you have to make a plan, right? 2 planning behavior change techniques that are often used are called implementation intentions and coping planning. Implementation intentions drive behavior by identifying cues towards action, like, I will always work out during my lunch break or after work. Now, coping plans involve anticipating barriers and creating alternative plans. Both action plans are so important, but just be mindful of your timing on these conversations. For instance, discussion around serious planning might not be ideal for people in that iffy contemplation stage. A better approach might be to go over some barriers that have already arisen and collaborate on plans to work around them if they happen again. Encourage that little voice in a client's head to keep up with self-monitoring to keep them on track with their goals. Clients can't influence their intentions and behavior if they don't pay attention to all of their internal triggers and reflect on the conditions that contribute to their behavior. If clients can monitor their thought patterns and behaviors, along with the conditions under which the behaviors may or may not occur, they may even start to notice precursors to that behavior. An exercise log or journal is a great way for clients to maintain accountability to the program. There are cognitive strategies that can be useful as well. They're intended to alter the way someone thinks about an activity with a goal to increase motivation, adherence, and sometimes even performance. These strategies include positive self-talk, psyching up, and the use of mental imagery. Positive self-talk is just what it sounds like, a form of encouraging and motivating internal dialogue that increases self-efficacy. For someone new to exercise, there may be a lot of negative thoughts towards exercise, like, I can't do this, it's too hard, it takes too much time, or it's too painful. Positive self-talk can help them move past this negativity, abandoning that sneaky inner dialogue that critiques a person's own abilities. There are methods around it like reverse listing and the stopping technique. Reverse listing is when you identify a negative inner narrative and replace it with positive statements. Stopping is simply the act of saying stop out loud when negative thought patterns pop up. Together, stopping helps break the vicious cycle of negativity, while reverse listing helps turn the thoughts into positive ones. Using mental imagery can also assist with reducing negative thoughts. It's the process of imagining a situation and experiences that support or enhance exercise participation. It's a great confidence booster. Clients can mentally rehearse their performances with positive feelings and outcomes to boost motivation and reduce anxiety. There are also some subsets here. Appearance imagery is when a client imagines appearance or health-related outcomes. Energy imagery refers to mental images used to increase energy and relieve stress. Technique imagery involves focusing on exercise technique and making that as close to perfect as possible. Clients can use imagery at any time, but you'll find it's particularly effective during a time when they may not be feeling motivated or positive about exercising. And now, psyching up. Come on! You know exactly what I'm talking about with this one. Motivation can be a challenge, and that's where the CPT comes in. It's on you to get clients excited, positive, engaged, and energetic before and during exercise. You can do this through music, motivational videos, dancing, or implementing a specialized warm-up routine. Just be sure to have continued conversations with your clients about what's working for them and what isn't. It's just another way you can be sure that they'll adhere to an exercise program. Yes, the primary goal of the fitness professional is to help individuals adopt a regular exercise program and stay active for the long term. CPTs need to understand how ready clients are to change and take the right thoughtful, strategic action to increase their motivation and commitment. Keep it thoughtful and interesting, fun and exciting, and keep them wanting more.
So. Whoa. Oh no, hold on.
There's a saying.
Don't you dare. Oh Lord, okay. I'm gonna choke on my coffee. So there's a little bit more in there than we necessarily need. All of that is very good information. But in terms of like what we're going over, the stuff that's like makes good test questions, right? Are goal types. So let's go ahead and start with SMART goals here. So again, SMART is an acronym. So SMART goals. It is a goal-setting system, and then by definition, if you do get the question like, what is just a general SMART goal, right? It is a goal-setting system designed to improve the likelihood of goals being achieved by making them more specific, quantifiable, and achievable. Okay, let me not change my font size, please. That's annoying. So, and like I said, it is an acronym. So we see S, M, T. So the first one we're going to see is specific. And what we mean when we say like a goal is we want to make sure our goals are specific. It should be just clearly defined. The goal should be clearly defined. If you do a very good job of making your goals specific, a lot of times, guys, the rest of it already happened. Specific goals generally are measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Now, I will say measurable is probably my next favorite one, but it's like the goal progress should be objectively measured and easy to track. So that's one thing about like a measurable goal is that like when I say that it's objective, or when I say that it's measurable, I mean that it is objective, right? Like again, being rich, I don't know what you mean. That actually tells me that it's not like attainable, but like, you know, I don't know like when are you done? Like what does rich mean for you? You know what I mean? So we want to make sure we try to put like it's typically number based information on that goal. Now, attainable is good. The word attainable just I don't know if this is just a me thing, but like it just doesn't what we mean by an attainable goal, right? Is that it's the goal must be a challenging but achievable. Which again, like the idea of being rich, like you can't really achieve that because everybody's definition is a little bit different. So I'm like, but I will say this, like when I use the word attainable in my brain, that means that it's realistic, which is our next thing. So what I mean when I say attainable, I the term that I actually like that sometimes people say instead is they'll say actionable. And the reason I like that term better is because like an actionable goal is like a goal that like I know specifically what actions you are going to take in order to achieve it. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think it's just like we all have different, slightly different definitions of words in our heads. But that one I like the word actionable better whenever I hear SMART goal lectures. But attainable is I think the original version. So the next one is realistic. And a realistic goal is the goal should be relevant to your life. So what I mean by that is like, you know, if your goal is to, again, be a millionaire by next month, like that's not very realistic unless you've got some long lost uncle that, you know, you didn't know about. That's like leaving you a lot of money. You get some heiress in the family who's gonna like leave you her, you know, small island in the Bahamas, you know. Sure, yeah, like maybe it's realistic. But like it should be relevant to your life. You know what I mean? If you have like if you have a client who you're working with who has like a metabolic disorder, a fast weight loss goal is probably not very realistic because it's not relevant to their biology. But doesn't mean that they can't still make that progress, you know, at their own pace. Over a very slightly, you know, different sort of timeline there. And then speaking of timeline, our next one is timely, or I like the word time bound sometimes, which is like your goal should have deadlines. I'll show this video in another class later for you guys who are going to stay with me after this. But Lisa knows like one of my favorite videos that you guys can check out on YouTube if you want to watch it early, and you've probably seen it because it's one of the more famous TED Talks. It's called Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator. And it's this guy who, you know, talks about procrastination. And what I really like about his talk is that like he talks about you know, like procrastination is kind of funny in a way. You know, it's like it's this kind of cute thing that we all do where we wait to the last minute to do something and then we're like, oh man, the amount of stuff I was able to do, you know, in this short period of time. It's kind of a humble brag sometimes. You're like, I didn't do it on time. So, you know, it was April 15th and my taxes were due and I did them in like 20 minutes. It was crazy, you know? And it's like, that's actually kind of funny. It's something we all, you know, kind of laugh about in the world of procrastination. But he talks about kind of the dark side of procrastination, which is the like, I'll get to it someday, like these major life goals that you might have. Like, you know, spending time with your family or doing this or doing that. And it's like you'll put it off and put it off because there's no like real deadline. And it's like when you have a deadline, like as a procrastinator, it's amazing what you'll accomplish sometimes, you know? Like you'll find the amazing willpower to do all this work in 20 minutes. You know, that's incredible. But like, you know, the idea of like meeting like certain life goals sometimes doesn't happen. So deadlines are huge. Timely is one of my favorite parts of the whole SMART goal system there, but giving yourself deadlines is just a really great way to make sure that you get creative about how you're going to get something done. So that is you want to, whether your goal is short, long, lifetime, process, or outcome, you just want to make sure you run it past the SMART goal system and say like, you know, okay, like a short-term goal, eat more vegetables. It's, you know, that's pretty good, right? But you could make that a little bit more specific and a little bit more measurable and give it a deadline and make sure that it is a short-term goal. So maybe it's like, I want to, you know, get 4 servings of vegetables in a day, every day this week, right? So that's a short-term goal. It's only 1 week long, right? It's specific because it is eating specifically fruits and vegetables, right? It's measurable because you want to do it 4 servings per day. It's actionable. I know exactly what actions I need to take in order to get more vegetables in my diet, which is add freaking vegetables to my diet. It's realistic. I feel like I can do that. And it's timely. It's by the end of the week. I want to try to have done this every day for 7 straight days. It's a really good short-term SMART goal. And I would also call that a process goal. You know, I'm getting better at the process of eating more fruits and vegetables. So I like the goal. Somebody tells me like, I want to eat healthier, right? That's a good process goal in general, but it could be more specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So that's how you want to use the SMART goal system. And again, guys, each one of these are probably really good test questions. Either the whole thing or each one of these, right? Like think of it this way. You got A, B, C, D. You know what I mean? Like you can literally see this as a text question I'm going to ask them. So that's big. Outcome goals. The goal is a specific outcome, like winning or losing or accomplishing something. We like outcome goals, like in terms of like accomplishing something. I don't love the hyper competitive outcome goals for my clients. Only be like winning a race. I like it if you're a professional athlete. You know, that makes a lot of sense. But I don't love like competition-based goals for amateur like clients, just because like you can work your best, but it's really hard to know how hard somebody else is working, you know? So then that can lead to frustration if you're on like a lifetime, you know, goal. So instead, I prefer process goals. I will say this, I think process goals are what lead to really good outcome goals, you know? If you have an outcome goal, great. Come up with a few things that you can do that will change your process that will make that better. You know, for instance, just because it's so relevant to my life right now, but like Lindsay and I building this darn escape room, right? The overall outcome is to get that done, you know, but the process was like, if we can just accomplish 1 or 2 bullet point things a day, you know, over the course of time, like that's going to get done. So, even though this year we were cutting it down to the wire. Okay, I'm going to come back to this one. Now, the next thing you also need to be able to do, and this is also a really big, excuse me, this is also a really big section of test questions, mastering these stages of change model. Now, this is one of those definitions that I really hate because it's a definition with two names. So always frustrating, but there is the more scientific name, which is it's actually named after this guy, this Prochaska, but it's Prochaska's trans-theoretical model of change, which nobody wants to say. Or you could say it's the stages of change model, which is what most people will say. So the stages of change is basically going to describe how we adopt new habits. This is something we all go through, by the way. We all experience habit changes in this sort of manner, you know? Some of us are going to move through certain stages faster than others, and we'll move through different things faster than than others. But like, for the most part, when it comes to like changing your habits, we all sort of experience it like this. And basically, you just need to know what each of these things are by definition. So these make really good flashcards, right? So pre-contemplation, a client who's in the pre-contemplation stage of change, probably not a client. This is an individual who has no intention of adopting new habits or changing a habit anytime between now and the next 6-month period. So I will say this, when it comes to the stages of change model, guys, it's really helpful to know like what the definition is, but it's also really helpful to look at it in terms of timeline. So when we look at the stages of change model, right? It's good to think of it in terms of its definition, but it's also really good to think of it in terms of timeline. So one is pre-contemplation, right? Which is an individual who has no intention of changing. Has no intention of changing. So that's helpful, but another helpful part of it, within the next 6 months. So if I said, you know, hey, you know, Frank, I want you to become a professional bodybuilder and get up on stage within the next 6 months, right? If you're a pre-contemplator, you're going to go, no, right? You don't really have that intention, right? Oh, that's dumb, because it's not going to. So pre-contemplation, somebody who does not intend to change, and they don't intend to change within the next 6 months. Contemplators, that's good. That's a wow. Freaking there. Thank goodness. Oh no, never mind. Ugh. Sorry, guys, 1 second. This is the frustrating thing with Microsoft Paint. So no intention of changing within the next 6 months. Contemplators are somebody who do intend to change within the next 6 months. So somebody who's in the contemplation stage is an individual who does intend to change within the next 6 months. So two things there, right? One thing, the difference between a contemplator and a pre-contemplator, one intends to make a new habit change, one does not. The other thing is, it is within the next 6 months, the other person. So like a pre-contemplator could be somebody who's like, yeah, like maybe I'll get to that someday. Like I'll change in the next 5 years, right? That's still like a pre-contemplator. It's basically in the so far forward in the future that it kind of doesn't matter. Contemplators are like, okay, I'm not ready to start changing right now, but I'm going to commit to this within the next 6 months. So now they're on the road of like thinking about changing consistently. So the more they start to think about it, the more it starts to become a reality. And eventually they're going to move into the next phase, which is preparation. Now, a client who is in the preparation stage, this is probably somebody who actually walks through the gym door. Most clients are either late stage contemplators or preppers. They actually show up to the gym. So this is an individual who who actually might have started exercising, but really sporadically, or they intend to make like large, very specific changes within the next 30 days, right? So this is an individual who they're kind of like, they kind of dipped their toe into the waters, right? Made small changes, but intends to make larger, more overt changes within the next 30 days. Okay, so that's like a little bit different. This is like within the next 30 days, they're gonna like really change their habits and like really get into some new stuff. So that's a prepper. Most people who come to the gym and sign up for like a new gym membership are preparation level clients. And then you have your action level clients. And these are probably the ones that you're actually working with. You are a lot of times like the process of sales is turning someone who is a prepper into an actioner, you know? But action is people who have actually made some specific changes. Oh, actually, whoops, this is supposed to be who have made some specific changes. So they have made changes, but they haven't necessarily maintained this for more than 6 months. Right? So that is the action level client. They haven't necessarily maintained those for longer than 6 months. I'm gonna get rid of the word necessarily here. I'm trying to keep this relatively short and boiled down. So that's an actioner, right? Now, actioners are great. That's your client that you're probably working with. So now our goal is to get somebody to move out of the action stage to where, like, because think about it, like somebody who's in action, they've made changes, but it's still taking effort and willpower to stay on that road and continue these new habits. You know what I mean? They're actively putting effort into the habit. What we want to get people to is where they are inactively or passively not putting any effort into the habit. The habit is just a habit, right? Hopefully everybody in here is in the final stage, maintenance, when it comes to things like brushing your teeth every day, right? Like, hopefully, I mean, Lisa, you had toothbrush with you the other day. Hopefully, we are all in the maintenance phase. But when you were a kid, your parents were like, hey, you got to brush your teeth. Hey, you got to brush your teeth. Hey, you know, like you were on their schedule. Like they had to remind you consistently to do this until eventually it just became a habit. Now it's like part of your routine, you know? I remember when I first started getting up early, you know, living the trainer life, you know, 6 a.m. appointment. I got to get up at 5, you know. I remember like when I first started doing that, I was really worried about getting up that early, like consistently, you know. I'm like 18 years old. No, I'm not 18. I started training when I was like 19, but you know, I'm like, all I had was like high school and, you know, getting up for that. I didn't have, you know, we didn't have basketball practice before school. We had it after, you know what I mean? Like, and so like, I never really had to be like a super early riser in life, you know? And so like I was worried that I was just like not gonna be very good at this. And I was like struggling to turn over and like turn off my alarm. And I was like, I'm gonna lose this job. So what I did was like I paired, you know, something that was a big effort, which is me getting up in the morning, with something that was like very minimal effort that I would do naturally. So I paired my, you know, action habit with something that was maintenance for me, which was for me brushing my teeth. So I would basically have my alarm by the bed, and then 2 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, something like that later, my alarm would go off in my bathroom. And if I didn't get up to turn that alarm off, it would drive me crazy, but it would drive my roommates crazy. So I couldn't have that. And so I would like get up and then on top of my phone, so I wouldn't like run back and roll into bed, I would put my toothbrush on top. And so like it was in my hand because I had to turn my phone off. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start that habit, you know? And that's what did it for me. So maintenance is someone who has made specific changes and maintained them for longer than 6 months. If you can keep something up for about 6 months, you can probably keep it up for life, is the idea here. So who has made specific changes and maintained them for longer than 6 months. That's what we're looking for. So there's kind of two, this is what's tough about like this in terms of like test content. You kind of got two pieces of information on every one of these bullet points. So look out for that, guys. But you know, you know the definition. A pre-contemplator has no intention of changing. Contemplator does intend to change, but like not yet. Preparation has actually made small changes, but they haven't like maintained them for a while. Action is like made changes, but they haven't maintained them for even longer. And then maintenance is like they've maintained their new habits for a really long time. A couple of things you got to be aware of in the stages of change model that isn't tested on, but like there are chronic contemplators. Chronic contemplators, here's the thing. The difference between a pre-contemplator and a contemplator, a pre-contemplator has no intention of changing. They probably don't know that exercise is good for them. They probably don't know that smoking is bad for them. They probably don't know that jogging regularly is very healthy. That sounds kind of crazy when I say it, but it's true. Like, you know, I mean, it's crazy to me. It blows me away that we still live in a world where people like smoke cigarettes regularly. That blows my mind. Like, because the information, I get it. If you're from like the 50s, everything in media was telling you that smoking is both cool and actually pretty healthy for you. It's a good way to take the edge off, and that's really good for you. You know, like we were told that it was good for us for a really long time. Then, for decades, we were told, well, it's not good for you, but it's not that bad for you. You know, but now we know exactly how bad it is for us, right? So while it's not crazy, I get that there are still smokers out there, but what blows my mind is that there are new smokers out there. That breaks my brain. And I just have a really hard time understanding it sometimes. You know, now talking about that, and you know, kind of addressing like what I mean here, where I need to have a little bit more sympathy for it is a big part of the reason why people don't make that change or get rid of that habit is because they're pre-contemplators. So what makes a pre-contemplator? It's somebody who has no intention of changing. Well, why would somebody not have any intention of changing? Well, they might not know any better. I know it's crazy to say, like, yeah, all the science is out. We know smoking is bad for us. It has no benefits, right? Except for maybe there's some interesting, like, short-term memory benefit to nicotine, but you don't have to smoke to get that. You put that in like an energy drink or something. That's a really whole fascinating thing. But we don't want to get sidetracked by that. But I should have more sympathy because there are plenty of things that people have told me that I believe here, but I don't necessarily believe here. You know what I mean by that? Like, hey, this causes cancer. And it's like, yeah, but it causes cancer for like everybody else, not for me. You know what I mean? Like it's people, we make that jump a lot psychologically. A lot of our clients do, right? Somebody might be overweight or struggling with their weight for years. And it's like, hey, like we know that obesity is linked to heart disease and diabetes and all these like different things, right? And it's like, yeah, but like my whole family is over and like they don't have any problems. You know, and it's like you'll hear stuff like that sometimes, and it leads to a belief, it leads to people being pre-contemplators, right? So we want to, I know that I need more sympathy for stuff like that. I'm sure that you guys might be like me, but it's tough when people say something and there's data to back it up, but it's like humans, we're very good at ignoring data. You know what I mean? We are very good at being like, that's true, but like, is it true? You know what I mean? Like, is it really true? That's one thing that's kind of interesting about it. So that's our stages of change model. This idea of it's kind of the stages we all go through, right? So the idea of like, oh, I could never exercise, or like I don't have access to, I'm a pre-contemplator. I don't have access to a gym. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy, right? Or I don't really need to, I'm healthy enough, right? And then eventually you start, more data comes out, you read some article or something happens, or maybe a gym opens up near you or has a better pricing model for you. I mean, Frank, you got like the world's greatest deal. I mean, Planet Fitness is always a good deal, but you got like the greatest deal of all time I've ever heard of. So something like that opens up, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, maybe I could start going to the gym regularly. You instantly just became a contemplator, right? So you're like, but it's the could. You're not ready, you're not going, right? But you're like, nah. So you're a contemplator, right? And then eventually it's like, okay, well, now I know exactly. I drove past it the other day and I saw how long it'll take me. Now I really think I could do that. Maybe I'll go get some gym clothes. Maybe I'll even, look up a workout online, right? So you become like a prepper. You might make some small changes, right? And then eventually start dipping your toe in the water, start going. And you're going, but you're falling off the wagon. You're supposed to go 3 days a week. You go 2 days a week, 1 week. You go three the next week. You go one the week after that. As you're kind of bouncing around chaotically. That's an actioner. But eventually it's that 2 a week, that becomes 3 a week, and then it becomes 3 a week consistently, and then you get really good at it. And now you haven't missed a session in 4 weeks. Now you're doing it so well, you're staying in action. If you can stick it for 6 months or longer, it kind of just becomes like a maintenance thing, and it kind of just starts happening. It's like, the grass is green, the sky is blue, and I go to the gym 3 days a week, right? It's not this habit that I'm like investing effort into. It's just something that sort of happens naturally. So that's kind of how the stages of change model works. Now, in other classes, I get to spend a little bit more time telling you how to move people through these stages. That's a big part of like what we do, is using the right tools to push somebody from one phase into the next, because we want to get everybody to maintenance, we want to find that Monopoly card that says advance to go, collect your $200, Pre-contemplators, usually the reason people are pre-contemplators is because they don't know or believe in the benefits of something. So education is the best tool to push them into contemplation. Teach them, and then they learn, oh, that is good for me. And then they start doing it. Contemplators, these are people who, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna get there someday. Turn someday into tomorrow, right? So these are individuals, some of the best stuff. It's actually very similar. It's educating, but it's educating them from a first-person standpoint. So it's like, yeah, no, exercise is good, right? That's how you get a contemplator to become, a pre-contemplator to become a contemplator. But exercise is good for you, and you can do it if you do these things. Suddenly a contemplator is like, oh, that is realistic. They start becoming maybe a prepper. Prepper, give them as many tools as you can to help them move straight into action. Preparation, we want it short. We want it to be really short. We want them to transition between thinking about it and doing it pretty quickly. So give them small tools to help them. A workout schedule, a workout journal, tell them what clothes to go buy, things like that. Come up with a schedule, and then action, give them all the support they need to maintain that change and get them to that 6-month marker, and then eventually once they're in the maintenance phase, now the best way to keep them there, give them new, bigger, and harder goals. It's actually one of the best ways to do it. Or help turn your clients into leaders, your more advanced clients, have them be the demo for you if you're doing group exercise. Little things like that are the things that, because then you start to have this psychology of like, oh, other people are, like depending on me, you know what I mean? And like that keeps you in maintenance. It becomes less about you. So, that's a really quick, dirty explanation of that. But if you're a test prep, you really only need to know what they are by definition, and then So no intention doesn't change. Small changes, big changes for long periods of time. And then know the timelines. Not within the next 6 months. Yes, within the next 6 months. Yes, within the next 30 days. This is within. Oh my God, this is supposed to be just within. Just gonna delete that G. And then they've maintained changes for not 6 months and then for yes, 6 months. Those are your stages. Okay. So moving on from there, getting into a little bit of the motivational interviewing, which they're calling motivational coaching here. I'm not sure why they're doing that. So motivational interviewing, this is a really good technique as well. This is kind of just all by itself here. This is just its one little method here, but motivational interviewing, guys, is actually you need to develop the skill of asking questions to get to the heart of why your client actually wants to achieve their goal. So finding specific ways to quantify like what it is your client is actually trying to achieve and accomplish and why they want to achieve and accomplish those things is really a big deal. So that is going to be in here. Nope, that one. So this is where you need to develop the skill to basically ask like targeted questions, right? So like what brought you to the gym today is pretty good, but it's kind of vague. It's, like if you have a new client coming and like sitting down with you, it's pretty vague. It's pretty, bland in terms of like how you're asking it. But like as they start to like reveal details of their life, and it's like, oh, well, my family has a history of heart disease, or, I've always wanted to run a marathon. I just want that sense of accomplishment, things like that. You start to get to an idea of where, there's a bit of a discrepancy between how people see themselves versus like where they want to see themselves versus where they actually are. Like, it's funny in the exercise psychology materials, it's the same like picture here with the whole like self discrepancy thing. But it's like it's like a triangle instead. And it's like the idea that like everybody wants to be their ideal self, right? And then there is sort of how people actually see themselves. And then the reality is probably somewhere in there in the middle, So like, for instance, you might see yourself as somebody who is really punctual. Like people always told me if you're 5 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late. So I'm always early, like I'm never late, you might see yourself as that, but then like, maybe that's you, like your ideal self is that like you would never, ever be late for anything, right? So you see yourself as pretty close to that ideal version, right? But the reality is like maybe you're a little bit more late than you actually think you are, or maybe not, but there is like a little bit of like asking targeted questions of like, well, when was the last time you were late for something? And I'm like, oh, yesterday, actually, now that you bring it up, or like, maybe getting to the heart of like why it's so important to that person is also a big part of motivational interviewing. Like knowing what their motivations are behind this. Like, well, why is that such an important thing for you? So like losing weight, why is that so important to you? Or, getting a 6-pack abs, right? Because you'll hear people will say stuff sometimes, and then you'll find out their goal has nothing to do with what they actually want or like want to accomplish. So like people will often like mistranslate. They're like, oh, I need to lose a few pounds. And it's like, oh yeah, why is that? And it's like, well, my doctor said that my blood pressure was high. And it's like, don't get me wrong, like, high body weight is associated with high blood pressure, but those aren't necessarily the same problem. You can be at a high BMI and have very healthy blood pressure. So from like a programming standpoint, I kind of see those two things as very differently, but my clients see them as very much the same thing. They're like, I want to be healthier, right? And they'll just translate that to a weight loss. It's like, well, what if you're taking massive amounts of like ephedra which is like a really dangerous stimulant, and things like that. That can help you lose weight. It totally does, you know. Cleanses, they absolutely get your weight down pretty quickly because you lose a massive amount of glycogen. Did they actually make you healthier? That's a different conversation. So that's where like our expertise sometimes work in our disadvantage, you know, because like when I tell you guys, hey, you've got a client who is hypertensive and they need to lower their blood pressure, that's a very, you instantly have a couple ideas in your head probably of like how you're going to address that. But your client's going to come to you and they're going to be hypertensive. Their doctor told them that they have high blood pressure. And the only thing they know is that like body weight and things like that are somewhat related to blood pressure. So they're going to come to you and say, I want to lose weight. So you put them on a weight loss routine and you might not be doing the things that actually help with their blood pressure. So motivational interviewing is going to help you understand your clients much, much more clearly and get to the heart of what they actually want to achieve. So learning how to ask questions that are going to get your client, you know, to maybe measure, you know, be a little bit more objective about things. You know, you can do like a commitment check and say like, scale of 1 to 10, how important is, you know, making this change in your life? If they say it's like a 10 out of 10, that seems pretty darn important. So, okay, well, what about how confident? How confident are you that it's going to happen? Maybe they say like a 3 out of 10. And you're like, whoa, right? So you massively want to change, but have very little confidence that you are actually going to accomplish it, right? And then what about like a readiness? How ready are you to change today? And they're like a 1. And you're like, oh, so you're afraid of the consequences. I told you guys that story of Jack, who came to the resort and was basically kidnapped by his family and taken to a weight loss resort, which is not a good way to start a weight loss journey. But he was literally afraid, you know, he believed it was extremely important for him, but his confidence and readiness to change were both 1s. I mean, he was nervous, you know. So I didn't have to convey the importance of being there to him. If I'm spending all my time being like, it's great, you're going to lose weight, it's going to be so good and healthy for you, all of that is landing on deaf ears. He already believed all that. But if I'm talking to him and I'm like, hey, we're going to start slow, we're going to keep you in the pool, it's going to take all the pressure off your joints, and it's going to make this an approachable thing. Like, we're a group of experts. We're here to make sure that we keep you safe, right? That's going to boost his confidence. And then if I'm like, you know, hey, tell you what, come walk with me right now. We're going to go up and like look at the facilities. And I just show him some of this and like make him feel a little bit better and like get him out into nature, which I did, right? What that's going to do is like, that's going to make his readiness for change a little bit higher and be like, hey, what you went through, like getting kidnapped and taken here, like that is super traumatic and honestly, like not okay. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't stoked that you're here though, because like I think you're gonna have a really, really good time. And I think like if I asked you like what you are ready for, you already walked up, and it was a big ramp from like here to here. Trying to remember like this conversation in detail. I do remember this in detail. This is like a big moment for me. I was relatively new at the time. And this was like an extreme like win for me when I was like in that point of my career. But I remember like just like walking, I was like, hey man, like you were able to walk up this because it was a pretty steep ramp actually. Just now, you can do that. I promise you're gonna be able to do your laps in the walk-in laps in the pool. And like, look, and I brought him to the pool and I was like, it doesn't go to the deep end. We don't have a deep end. It's here for group exercise. It's not that type of pool. And he was like, and that made him like he felt like he was much more capable of accomplishing his thing. So he was more ready, you know. Every client's different, you know, that's just one individual story, but there's a lot of things that you need to do to get to the heart of like what's actually important to your client, how they see themselves. And like, you know, what the actual, you know, what tool is actually going to be the thing that sort of unlocks your client's capacity for making these changes. So, cool. How are we doing so far, guys? Any questions on anything I've said? I haven't checked in a while. I've done a bad job of that today. Any questions or comments?
All good.
Okay. Well, we're getting there. We're almost we're working our way through a good chunk of this. Next bit we got to get into is some of our behavior change strategies. So what are some things that you can do to, you know, increase adherence? So now we're back into the SMART goals here. But so one thing that you can do, you're trying, like I said, you're trying to increase what we call adherence, right? You're trying to get your clients to adhere to the model. So one big thing that you're going to do is give your clients like different types of like support in order to achieve what they need to achieve, right? So we are basically, that's what a trainer is. We are a big bag of support, you know, like with a bunch of different tools in it, right? Oh, that's not what I want. When it comes to like creating some really good like strategies to help our clients, right? One big thing is giving your clients either instrumental support, which is literally giving them instruments or tools that they need. So giving your clients a stopwatch, giving your clients a workout journal, you know, things like that, literal physical tools. That is what we call instrumental support. There's also emotional support. You are going to be able to do that pretty naturally just by being there and listening. But emotional support is literally just encouraging a client or giving them positive feedback. Informational support is you are an expert. So giving your clients the education that they need about diet and exercise, maybe helping them understand like what information sucks, like bad information, how they can get rid of that. And then companionship, even just being there. You know, I've said this a million times to you guys, but I've had days where my clients show up and they're so hungover and they're just like, I'm here for you today. I don't want to be here. And I'm like, great, I'll take it. I can work with that. You know, I'd rather you be excited, but like I will take your body just getting through the door. So there's a few other strategies that you can implement as well, right? One of the biggest ones, habit tracking, stress reduction, and time management are all really big. So when it comes to like habit tracking, guys, helping your clients learn how to self-monitor, use that journal, right? Really, really, really helpful here. So literally just giving them a food journal or something like that and just having them track that. Or you can use what's called like a food frequency questionnaire. You'll learn about this actually in your nutrition class when we have it. But a food frequency questionnaire is just a questionnaire that's literally like, hey, how often do you eat these things? Can I get one of these to open up, please? Boop. So this is just a little short example here, but beef, hamburgers, pork, lamb, chicken, this is all protein. Bacon, ham, yeah, this is all protein. And so it's like 1 to 3 times per month, once a week, 2 to 4 times a week, once a day, 2 to 3 times a day, 5, 6 times a day. Like literally you're just going to, you know, have a frequency of how often they have these things. It's really helpful to get an idea of like what it is your client's eating. It's also helpful for them to think more about what they're eating. So starting with something like that can be very, very helpful. It's really easy. It's something you can give your client as homework. Other self-monitoring techniques are literal food journals. So writing down what they ate, at what time they ate it, and how much of it that they ate is a really big one. Or you can even do just like a 24-hour dietary recall. If you can't get your client to do an actual food journal, you can just work them backwards. So like I could say, okay, Aaron, what did you have for breakfast today? And then let's go back to dinner from last night. Let's go back to any snacks that you might have had before that, lunch, any snacks there, breakfast. And you just go work your way back through the last 24 hours. It's kind of a down and dirty food journal in a way. But again, it just gets your clients thinking and being more aware of what they're actually putting into their body. So that's really, really helpful. Then time management tech strategies. This is a really big one. Everybody thinks going to the gym is either really super easy and they have all the time in the world for it, and then they find that they don't. Or most people are like, I don't have time to work out. So many people say they don't have time to work out, right? But finding time is the key, right, to getting physically active. It doesn't all like teaching your clients, it doesn't always have to be in the gym is a big part of time management. It's like, hey, you don't have to go to the gym every single day, 4 hours a day. You just need to be physically active. If you can even just, get out and go for a walk. I tell my clients all the time, fun fact about calorie burning, it burns just as many calories to walk 10 minutes a day 3 times as it does walking 30 straight minutes. Caloric expenditure, identical. Now, you're not going to build 30 minutes worth of endurance 10 minutes at a time. You can build 10 minutes of endurance, So they're not the same categorically, but there are some serious similarities to what you can accomplish. And if your goal is weight-based, get it in chunks, So get up 10 minutes earlier than you normally would. That's not a huge commitment. Go for a walk around the block, then start your normal daily routine. Going for 10, taking 10 minutes out of your lunch break, walk around, and then do 10 minutes when you get home before you walk through the door. Those things, that's all it takes to like burn a substantial amount of calories more than you used to, right? So that's turning, we're trying to basically like turn those things. That's the time we're trying to take the effort out of doing something, You guys have seen how I dress at Sochi. I wear like that is a self-imposed uniform. The whole like stretchy hoodie thing. I have 6 of those because I do not want to take the time to think about what to wear every day. I would wear those literally every day. Happen to be in a t-shirt today, but like, normally that is like my self-imposed uniform. And it's because like if I can take the time, effort, and energy out of like choosing what to wear every day, I'm going to save myself time to be more productive in other ways. And then I can dress nice when I go out to dinner or something, So helping your clients like turn exercise into something maybe you just do for 10 minutes at a time at home can be real helpful. And then when it comes to like muscle building and strength gaining, yeah, let's get to the gym, but let's go in with a plan. Right? You don't want to like walk into the gym time management wise and be like, okay, what am I going to do today? I could do some squats. I don't really love squats. That's really hard, but I probably should. Okay, I'll throw those in. And then, I really love doing biceps. I'm going to go do some bicep stuff after that. Yeah. And you make up this whole plan and you're sitting there for a half hour before you even get started. It takes all your time away. So having a listed out like pre-made workout is going to be super helpful. That again is like instrumental support from a trainer is going to help with that. But like highlighting that to your client, the one I like to do is what I quoted to you guys the other day. There's a Jim Gaffigan joke where he's talking about, he's like, you ever go to the gym and not work out? That's embarrassing. He's like, I go to the gym and I'm like, should I do the leg press or should I get on? I gotta go. And it's a funny joke, but it's like people do that, and so going in with a plan, knowing what you're going to accomplish, that's going to help with your time management. So we're going to be there to help our clients with that. So, habit stacking or tracking, stress reduction, and time management. Stress reduction, by the way, good ways to do that. This is a big one. Positive imagery. So seeing yourself accomplish something is going to reduce the anxiety associated with doing it. So if I've got a client who's very nervous about going to the gym, right, because they might be worried that somebody else is going to maybe look at them or like judge them for what they're doing, right? I'll encourage them. I'm like, you go to the gym next time. Or actually what I usually start with is I'll say something. I'll be like, all right, Shantice, do me a favor. Tell me about the last random stranger that you saw in the gym doing something that you would consider to be weird. Now, Shantice, I know you are you probably have
I was
some
gonna say,
opinions on
please
things.
don't get me started because that goes, oh my God. I have seen some of the weirdest stuff.
Well, here's the thing. You're a specific example of like somebody who's an expert in this, right? But when was the last time you saw it? Like, give me a timeline. When was the last time you saw somebody doing something that you genuinely like kind of paid attention to that wasn't your own workout or you as like, or like your client? Do you know what I mean? What I'll do oftentimes, I'll say that to my clients, and then they go, well, there was this like one time I saw this guy doing this thing. I was like, it was so weird and da 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 da. And I'm like, when did that happen? And they're like, that was like a year ago. And I'm like, so between now and a year, you can't think of any other people that you've seen doing something weird? That just shows, Mike. I like to do that because I'm like, most people are not paying attention to you at the gym. They're paying attention to themselves, Like, think about those guys in the mirror pulling their shirt up, looking at their abs, like, that's who they're paying attention to. They're paying attention to the person in the mirror, Don't get me wrong, we've all got stories of things we've seen, but like it is way less than you kind of think of in your head sometimes. So I'll do that sometimes, or I'll say, go to the gym, and next time you go to the gym, look around. You will notice nobody's really looking at anybody. I mean, it does happen, I'm not gonna say it doesn't happen. People can be punks, but the ratio of when it's happening is so little. Can I tell you guys just really quick sidetrack? ADD moment that I just love is there was a guy who was really nervous about losing weight and that he was going to be judged. So his buddy became his gym partner, and his buddy would wear like a weird costume. It's like he dressed like a Jedi. So he would go to the gym in a funky costume to draw attention off of his friend. And I saw like this is like a Reddit post from years. This is like years ago. But man, I love that story. I think it's only like the two pictures, but like I don't know. I picture it in my head that like they did that for like a year and just all of the fun costumes, and then his guy, like the story in my head is so much more beautiful than probably the reality. But I love that. I'm like, that's great. So yeah, helping your clients with that understanding of like, that stress relief, right? That idea that like there's a lot less to worry about there than they probably think there is. That's a big part of like what we're doing. And then again, like taking the stress of choice out, also very, very helpful. Now, there's also positive self-talk. This is really big for helping your clients. Now, this kind of comes back to moving into sort of the next section of like social influences. We are going to talk a little bit about like behavior change barriers. Now, barriers sounds like a bad thing. It's like these things in your way. But barriers can also be a really good thing because they can be like the bumper plates like at a bowling alley. Like when kids, they go bowling and they put little bumpers up so that it can't get a gutter ball. That's like, those are barriers, right? Those can be really, really helpful. So there are good barriers and bad barriers, right? Positive barriers are fun things that are kind of more fun than the gym. So they pull you away from the gym, and it's like, ooh. So positive barriers are like kind of things that are more fun than working out. Your client's like, I want to go to the gym, but also I want to stay in bed and I want to do some Herkel-Durkelen, That's a term that I learned recently, by the way. If anybody doesn't know what Herkel-Durkelen it is literally the Scottish phrase for staying in bed when you know you have things to do. So that is like a classic, right? Like I love working out, but I also love my bed, So positive barriers like a fun thing, or negative barriers are like, I love working out, but I don't particularly love being really hot and sweaty. I don't particularly love getting dirty. I don't particularly love how sore my muscles feel the next day, right? So those are the challenging or unfavorable things that somebody might avoid. It's a barrier that keeps them from going to the gym because they don't want to experience it. A positive barrier is like something that keeps them from going to the gym because maybe there's something else that's a little bit more fun, So time is a barrier, right? The idea that like it takes a really long time to go to the gym, the social physique anxiety, like we already talked about. Unrealistic goals can be a barrier. The idea that you can't accomplish your goals, or a lack of social support, recognizing that in your clients and like helping them build social support. I always tell my clients, I'm like, share it on social media. I don't say that so that you tag me and blow up my social media or anything. I'm not even on social. I mean, I am. I have them. But I, don't ever do anything on them. But like I constantly tell my clients to like post about their successes and stuff because like that barrier of like lack of social support gets torn down when you get a bunch of likes for like a before and after photo or something. That's great. Something that's more convenient than the gym might be a positive barrier that pulls you away. So I had a client who lived near a Carl's Jr. and that was, I don't know why Carl's Jr. I'm like, there are such better burgers out there, but that was the one he would go to all the time. He was like, dude, he's like, I just cannot, like, it's just on my way home. And I find myself pulling into that drive-through without thinking about it. I'm just all of a sudden, it's like, he would say it's like teleporting. He's like, I would just be on my commute, I'd get brainless, and then all of a sudden I'd be there. And I was like, so literally, we tried a bunch of stuff where it's like eat a snack before you get on the road. That didn't help. We tried a bunch of different things. And in the end, I was like, where do you live? And he lived like in between the 170 and the 101. And I was like, start taking the 170. I was like, it's like 0.1 miles more like longer of a commute. So he just started taking a different freeway, took a different exit, ended up not taking him past that burger joint, and all of a sudden that was the thing that worked. So that was a positive barrier that we had to eliminate in order to kind of get him to stay on track. So in terms of test content, positive barriers and negative barriers, guys. Ooh, you need to know what those are. Positive ones are the fun ones that pull you away. Negative ones are the negative things about working out that people are afraid of. Lastly, talking about stress relief. Where is that actually? Am I already there? I gotta dive into this. And self-esteem. Come on now. Load. My wife is watching some kind of action movie right now. I can hear it. What is going on here? Come on. All right. Oh, there it is. Good Lord. There it is. All right. So self-esteem, by definition, what we were going to say, it is the way that somebody sees themselves in terms of their value. So when it comes to like self-esteem, right? We know that like people see themselves as valuable when they are able to accomplish things. So one thing that actually leads to improved self-esteem is exercise. I mean, obviously, exercise is going to make you like look a little bit better and feel a little bit better, like physically, right? So that's going to improve like your overall body image. But self-esteem is also like it's a little bit more intangible. It's like how you see yourself in terms of like value. So like one of the biggest benefits of exercise is it is a place where you go to accomplish doing stuff. You begin to be a doer. And so you show up, you do the thing, maybe you don't succeed at first, you go back the next day, you do the thing again, maybe you still didn't succeed, but you got a little bit better. And eventually, like you're accomplishing more and more and more and more. That sense of self-accomplishment gives you feelings of self-value, which improve your feelings of self-esteem. So exercise has a direct positive psychological impact when it comes to self-esteem. That's going to reduce your overall stress in life because stress is obviously, there's a big hormonal response. That's the cool thing about exercise, guys. It is controlled stress, right? Remember that video I showed the other day that I freaking love? That the video, the reason I love that video where it's where it's talking about like how to grow a muscle, it has this quote at the end that I'm obsessed with. And it is with muscles as it is with life. Self-improvement comes through challenge and stress. Your muscles get bigger when you stress them, and then they blow up in response. They get stronger in response to stress. So does your whole life. You get better at stuff in response to stress. So exercise has been shown to be a place where you are literally controlling your stress. You are going in and you are experiencing stress, but then you are experiencing anti-stress afterwards. Your body will flush anti-stress hormones in to flush out all of that stress. So big benefits here: psychological response, stress relief. We get that as a hormonal response. It is a place where we do produce cortisol and adrenaline while we are in the gym. But when you recover and get good sleep afterwards, which exercise also promotes better sleep, that is going to reduce the amount of stress that you're experiencing. It's going to flush out that cortisol. It's going to flush out that adrenaline and lead to nothing but lots of dopamine and serotonin and really positive hormones there. And then obviously that's all going to have an improvement on self-image. Self-image, again, or body image, I should say, how an individual sees themselves. So that is the psychology stuff. A little bit different. It doesn't quite make as good of charts, in my opinion. Again, like soft sciences are a little bit more up here and in here. A little bit more emotional, a little bit more psychological. But that is really, honestly, guys, if you are worried about a lot of this stuff in terms of test content, memorize your goal types, memorize all your, what a short-term, long-term, process, outcome, and then memorize SM, A, and R and T in the SMART goal, and then memorize your trans-theoretical model of change. I would argue that 90% of NASM's questions from this chapter are going to come from there. So even if you only study this chapter for a couple hours before you go take your exam, but you just take the time to do SM, A, R, and T, it's 15 questions out of your exam. You will probably get, just by doing that, 10 out of 15 of them correct. Just knowing the stages of change, just knowing SMART goals. And then if you, barely studied a little bit, you'll probably get a couple more. It's a small section of the exam, and you really get a lot of gas out of just those two major concepts. So that's the advice that I always give people. SMART goal, like goals in general, but SMART goals is the big one. And then the stages of change model, guys. And then knowing a couple definitions, body image, how you see yourself. It's a big one, but. All right, we're working our way through the book. Tomorrow we are gonna take a break from the exam blueprint. We're gonna come back in. We did squatting, so I think we'll work on hinging tomorrow. We'll do a lot of the, or no, maybe we'll go to upper. I don't know. I'll figure it out tonight. But we'll come in and do a little bit more form fix stuff tomorrow that we can practice down in the gym. A little bit more hands-on stuff. Then we'll be back into domain 3. We're going to get into fitness assessments on Wednesday and talk about what to memorize there. That's a pretty big content. So, all right, guys, I appreciate you. Where's the button?